I would now like to welcome the Associate Vice President of the Strategy and Knowledge Department of IFAD and representative of IFAD Senior Management, Ms. Meike Van Ginneken. Ms. Ginneken will deliver an address. Meike, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Alexander. And while I represent senior management here, I also realize this is a learning event, and I actually don't have prepared remarks. I will give some reactions, of course, both with the corporate head, but also with the head of having actually worked on infrastructure throughout my career. Very interesting discussion. Thanks to our colleagues from IOE as well as our operational colleagues for their thoughts. Let me start by establishing that we need to distinguish between public goods and private goods when we talk about infrastructure. And I think in the slide on with the Olympic rings that was presented, I think that's part of that. No, but I think there's a very different discussion on public infrastructure, large irrigation networks, roads, etc., and private infrastructure, things that are private goods that are managed either by an individual or a family or a firm, or by a smaller community. I'm thinking about boreholes, solar panels, and the like. A lot of the discussion we're having about operation and maintenance and institutional setup really distinguishes between those two categories. As was presented, most of the infrastructure that IFAD finances is community-based infrastructure. So in that bottom left-hand corner on that slide with the Olympic rings, or in my lexicon, it's mostly private infrastructure. And you can use community-based operation and maintenance approaches to actually ensure sustainability. But I think if you look at the literature, and I've written some of that myself, you also know that for institutional and financial sustainability, just relying on community management, such as water user groups, etc., is actually insufficient. We know that community management without backstopping, without post-construction support, actually often falls apart, either because there's no cost recovery or because elite capture or discontinuation of the groups that that need to maintain this. So we need to think in either public government backstop and post-construction support mechanisms, which have been very difficult across the board. And this is not an IFAD problem, it's a world problem, very difficult to actually set up. It's always the first thing that gets cut in public budgets. It's nice as a politician to open a bridge. It's far less sexy to finance the operation and maintenance of a whole bunch of existing infrastructure. So either through public post-construction support that needs to be subsidized over a longer term and cannot be subsidized within an IFAD project or a donor project, it's core public financing, or you need to find a way of cost recovery with a private sector intervention. I mean, there's quite a lot of private sector post-construction support as well. I mean, just spare parts supply chains are mostly private. I mean, that's why, for instance, the Indian Mark II pump in water supply has been such a success, because it actually standardizes spare parts. So those were some general remarks. First of all, now I put on my my management hat. I just want we had an evaluation committee meeting on Friday where I already said that we generally agree with the findings that Johanna Pernartz presented. We think it's useful to have these kind of evaluation because it makes us a better organization and it's very useful for management. I think, Johanna, you probably today earned honorary citizenship of my country, the Netherlands, because you were very frank about some of the findings. And I think that's good in a learning event. As you said yourself, some of the findings are difficult because of the lack of data. And I think we need to use that as a caveat. The management response to the evaluation has been to agree with most parts of it. We have said that we are not planning to do specific infrastructure corporate strategy because we want to focus on action and because we have a plethora of other strategies, and having one more might not be actually solving this problem. So that's the corporate response to this. Having said that, we're very committed to making sure that we do infrastructure, more infrastructure, better infrastructure, etc. I think one thing we need to realize is that while we want to do more, we're constrained in all kinds of ways, and I think we need a selective approach based on our comparative advantage. And this is really more reflection from being a practitioner here. First of all, I think it's actually really important that the infrastructure we do in our projects is directly linked to our mandate and fully integrated in our programs. I know there will always be pressure from our client countries to kind of, oh, why don't you put on a little extra infrastructure here or there? I think we need to resist that and really make sure we don't get Christmas tree projects. I also think in terms of institutional arrangements, one of the major challenges we're facing is that for some of these infrastructures, we don't have relationship with the government institutions that actually are responsible for their sustainability. Let me explain this a little bit. Normally, when IFAD works in a country, our natural interlocutor is the Ministry of Agriculture, and we have good relations. If you build a road, the post-construction support, or even just the direct operation and maintenance, is normally with the transport agency or with the Ministry of Transport. That's a challenge because in a project, going from one interlocutor in the government to multiple interlocutor in the government, we need to think what's realistic there. In this respect, to be honest, I am actually not so concerned that the volume of lending we do on rural water supply and sanitation, on rural drinking water supply, is actually going down. I think that's on the margins of where our unique capabilities are. Having said that, it's very important, but we don't have to do everything that's important. Just wanted to end by saying a few words on capacity. I fully agree with everything that Johanna and Fabrizio and Imran said about the need of IFAD to enhance our capacity. I also am acutely aware that we have resource constraints to do that, and that, I would love to hire a dozen infrastructure specialists, but that will not happen overnight. I think what's very interesting about the panel we've just listened to is that while we say, oh yeah, we only have 2 specialists here or 4 specialists there, you actually see that there is capacity throughout the organization, both in the SKD department and in the PMD department, which probably is a little bit hidden behind the figures that were presented. I also think that, as Johanna already pointed out, IFAD is very consultant dependent. You hire the right consultant, that's great because you're really flexible, but we really need to think of what do we build up in-house and where do we use consultants, because we are consultant dependent. Probably most importantly, infrastructure is not just engineering, and I think our panel really showed that very well. So if you think about where do you want to build up in-house capacity, it is to bring things together, it is to hire and supervise the right consultants, and to leverage our consultancy budget in PMD, SKD, and elsewhere. In this, of course, we need engineers, but we also need other things. And I think the panel actually has already touched upon that. In the evaluation, SECAP, the environmental and social safeguards came up. We have a new SECAP policy, which is great. It's ready for the future. It's good for infrastructure, but we now need to roll that out. I think in this respect, it's actually quite complex to apply safeguards when you're actually co-financing a lot of things. Where does it end? I worked a lot on large infrastructure in the World Bank in the past, and the idea of associated infrastructure was always one of my big headaches. But I think that's also something that will come up in IFAD in the future. I was very happy. I mean, in the evaluation itself, it doesn't say that much about procurement capacity. It very much came up in the panelist discussion, and I think that's an area we really need to look at and really need to work together. For me, the kind of technical engineering infrastructure and technical safeguard capacity cannot be seen separately from how we procure and how we use our no objections to procurement of our clients' government to actually get that quality and the sustainability that we want. And then lastly, going back to where I started, the idea of the institutional and financial sustainability of infrastructure. How is O&M going to work? Who's going to pay for this? So that we don't only have infrastructure the day the project closes, but we have infrastructure 20, 25 years later. That's the lifetime we expect from the infrastructure we finance. For me, that's the biggest challenge, and very happy to hear in the panel that there's so many ideas and so many good practices. So let's work together to really see how we can scale up those good practices. And then in a few years' time, IOE will do another evaluation, and we will see that we've not only listened to the lessons here, but have implemented and made IFAD a better partner for our client countries. Thank you very much.